Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 241. The Emperor's Verdict. A faint sound was coming from the upper floor of the aristocratic hall. The source of the sound seemed far, yet near. It was almost as if fairies were singing amidst the clouds. The music sounded misty and wasn't clearly audible to any who listened to it, but it was this indistinctiveness of the sound which made it even more enchanting. Such a graceful and subdued sound was hard to describe. However, all those who had received the invitation cards were left to rejoice after listening to it. So much so that irrespective of the outcome of the coming auction, they would still consider this a very fruitful trip even if they didn't gain anything else. There were others who didn't have the invitation card, but were still standing amongst the crowd. Such people could only feel an unbearable itch in their hearts. They hated themselves for not having an invitation card after witnessing the elegant ambience of this place, since it meant they couldn't stay. I'll regret it a lot later on. I must get that invitation card even if it is very expensive. The invitation card's price continued to increase as the sunlight became brighter. In fact, the speed of its rise was so frightening that it could be compared to whirlwinds. Fatty Tang had initially been quite distressed by the amount that had been spent on making these cards. However, he now stood gazing in admiration at the scene which had been choreographed by the young Master Jun's persistence. Shouldn't he be called a business genius? I have been too short-sighted. Fatty Tang ridiculed himself. Jun Moxie was sitting calmly through all this commotion. However, even he hadn't expected that his plan would create the sensation of such an effect. The only explanation for this could be that the Tianxiang city had a lot of rich people. Moreover, they were crazy about invidious comparisons. Sunshine illuminated the sky. The aristocratic hall's on-sale invitations had been exhausted, and those who had been initially invited had arrived. In 3/4 of an hour, the main street was filled with first-rate carriages. All kinds of expensive carriages were parked next to each other. In fact, one could say that every vehicle in sight was expensive in its own right. When all was said and done, it was difficult to tell which carriage was the most luxurious. All the invitees had put forth their best harness to flaunt their aristocratic identities. In fact, they had spared no expenses on the jeweler that hung from their carriages. One could raise their eyes and expect to see a convergence of rich people. It would be most appropriate to use fatty as a metaphor to describe these portable mountains of gold. Even if he only lost a piece of his bodily meat, then this single piece could still support an ordinary family for a lifetime. 2 cultured white-clothed youngsters were standing at the door along with 2 beautiful young women. The 4 of them were serving as a welcome committee. They would examine the guests' invitation cards, and then beckon them in immediately. Soon after, a white-clad youngster would appear to receive them, and would cordially welcome and take them in. Even though 3 influential families had printed their seals on the invitation cards, none of the familiar faces from these households had come out yet. These people were the only welcome the guests had received. However, even though each individual's invitation card was being inspected before they were allowed to enter, no one felt that they were being treated in a disrespectful manner. Instead, they felt quite proud and honored. This was in accordance with logical reasoning. It would greatly degrade the reputation of these 3 families if any of their members were to personally come over to greet the guests. Hence, it would be considered a very inappropriate thing to do. Almost every guest appeared to be calm and high-spirited, irrespective of the fact whether this was their true demeanor, or just an effort to put on such an appearance. As they walked in, they unintentionally shot a glance at the crowd standing outside. This crowd comprised of people who hadn't received the invitations. The veins of the invited guests inevitably turned blue with anxiety as they quickly made their way through the crowd. They then accepted this arrangement in a quiet and aloof manner. The guests then strolled into the premises with elegance, and then disappeared into the lush flowers and trees. All who had received the invitation card showed up without exception, and many had been invited. They came in a continuous and endless stream, yet each one of them conducted themselves with dignity. Moreover, there were many people who ordinarily wouldn't accept such arrangements, but even these people were behaving modestly simply to demonstrate their magnanimity. However, shouldn't aristocrats always behave with nobility? This obviously didn't have anything to do with their present behavior. It just seemed as if they were trying to put up with the title of aristocracy that had been assigned to them. In the imperial palace, someone laughed heartily. There was only one person who could laugh like this inside the boundary of the imperial palace. It obviously wasn't one of the beautiful imperial concubines. In fact, even Mother Empress would adhere to the importance of mannerism and would not laugh so heartily. Even the favorite prince or princess would adhere to etiquette and refrain from demonstrating such a lack in manners. The salaried servants naturally would never dare. Keeping this in mind, the identity of the person who was laughing in this presumptuous manner was self-evident. His Majesty, the Emperor of Tianxiang's hand was clutching a white chess piece. He muttering to himself incoherently as he laughed loudly. This is actually quite an exquisite trick. Unusual but truly ingenious. I don't know who came up with this exquisite plan. It is hard to imagine that there is person in my Tianxiang who is surprisingly capable of producing clouds with one turn of the hand, and rain with another. Heh, pretty good. Pretty good. Sitting opposite him was a man of indiscernible age. He was dressed in white clothes that were as white as snow. He was tall and straight in stature, and even though he was merely sitting, his shoulders and back were straight. His appearance alone could make people tremble with fear. Straight black hair flowed down from his head and draped over his shoulders before scattering behind him. A beautiful triforked beard floated down to his chest. However, his face did not have a single wrinkle on it. In essence, his face was as fair and smooth as a lady's. That upright figure contemplated carefully as he glanced at the chessboard. This entire move is truly exquisite. That person's wine must be quite wonderful. But even if it is a heavenly secret and extremely difficult to find, its value cannot be over 10,000 silver taels per bottle. However, this kind of method will make all the influential families compete with each other. In fact, this method will enable him to sell them at over 10,000 silver taels. He might even surpass that amount. It truly is a good plan. But Your Majesty had said, produce clouds with one turn of the hand and rain with another. This person is still not that competent. Is that so? The Emperor smiled in a profound manner and then continued. In my opinion, however, he is. What does Your Majesty mean? The white-clad man intently looked at the chessboard. Even though he was sitting in front of such a great man, he did not seem to be behaving in a very deferential manner. It seems to me that this method of selling wine is ingenious, and has been done skillfully with much consideration. Moreover, it is important to note that it far surpasses an ordinary person's capability to calculate. It is truly amazing. His Majesty the Emperor slowly stroked his beard as he solemnly said, this plan seems simple, and one would think almost anyone can succeed with it. However, if it is that easy, then why hasn't anyone? I'd like to understand better. The man in white also started showing interest, and raised his eyebrows slightly. His eyes had an inquisitive look. It was important to understand people's feelings while formulating this plan. One must clearly understand human nature and its weak points, especially the psychology of the old and influential entities. It is important that one studies these things in detail, without missing out on even the most unimportant facts. Irrespective of whether the said individual is a nobleman, a commoner, a hoodlum, or a beggar, one must understand the weak point of all. If only one is able to grasp this single point, one will at once grasp the failings of people's personality. Then, regardless of who it is, even a person with a position at the imperial court will bow down. However, this part is only the foundation, and the beginning part of the plan. The emperor's eyes were belied by a hint of anxiety, and a bit of admiration. This man certainly has a gift for understanding the human nature, the emperor laid down his first conclusion. Secondly, I figure that the people who have gone there today are unlikely to come out empty-handed, and they're only auctioning wine inside. Therefore, each and every family which has gone in cannot return empty-handed, even if the wine is of poor quality. Moreover, they're auctioning the wine at a very high price. Hence, no one will buy it for cheap. The price will be insignificant, and they will not calculate or care about the money they spend. What they will care about is their reputation. The corners of the emperor's mouth rose to show a hint of ridicule, because too many of the people who did not receive the invitation cards are waiting outside. Wouldn't the crowd possibly await an opportunity to ridicule the so-called aristocrats? Anyone who has received the invitation letter and has gone to the auction will not want to lose out. They cannot afford to if they wish to save face. That man has figured out that he can openly, and without fear, fill his pockets with the money he fishes out from each and every family present here. Moreover, everyone will be excited about it. They will all be busy striving to be the first and fearing to be the last. All because they fear being belittled by others. Spending over 10,000 taels in front of the whole capital city will better their reputation. They can justify their status, as long as they are able to buy something. This man is a master who fully deserves amassing all that money. Quite unfortunate for the others though. The emperor made his second conclusion. The white-clothed person sitting opposite to him listened in a calm manner. His face was so blank that there wasn't even a single ripple in response. Third, you have to take note of the names on that list. If you give it a careful look, it will be obvious that although this list has snared almost all the big families of the capital to go in, but there is still something rather interesting about it. This list is actually not complete. Every business will have its respective rivals. Naturally, the rich noble families involved in this business have their own rivals. Often, these rivals are well matched to keep the industry booming for a long period of time. This list also needs to be altered in order to maintain equilibrium. Otherwise, the prices will drop and the merchant won't make profits. Or the prices will rise too high and no one will show interest. However, this man's list, intentionally or otherwise, will completely break the equilibrium I have painstakingly built over many years. Moreover, they will not leave even the smallest of clues. Therefore, even though I want to blame someone for this, I do not know who. The eyes of the white-clothed man looked puzzled after hearing this. It was evident that he hadn't understood what he had heard. He. His Majesty laughed. I'll explain with an example. The Sun, the Mu, and the Zhao family are the three of the most well-known entities in the capital's salt market. These three are like the legs of a tripod. Amongst these three, Zhao family is the most powerful. Its strategies make it stronger than the other two families. Admittedly, the Sun and the Mu family are somewhat weaker, but they frequently combine to withstand the influence of the Zhao family. The Sun and the Mu family can therefore be used to maintain the equilibrium of power. This list includes the Zhao family, but not the other two old families, when in fact everyone knows that the other two families are also worth millions in capital and resources. Yet why haven't they received the invitation? However, no one can really blame the man behind the aristocratic hall, since he has already invited the most able representative of the salt industry, the Zhao family. This method is used in several industries to earn huge profits, only inviting the representatives of the families which have the most influence. The emperor looked increasingly worried. And to use such formidable means of propaganda to add fuel to the fire between two rival families. I'm afraid that a conflict will arise within a very short period of time. Those who received the invitation will act arrogantly towards the others, while those who hadn't will be angry. They will feel that they are being pushed aside and are being considered beneath the first-rate personalities. As a result, chaos will be initiated. All this reveals only one thing: this person can be considered a true master of the tactics. The emperor made his third conclusion. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 242. One smile can obliterate hate and grievances. This person actually seeks wealth. However, the amount he seeks is huge. By no means can we consider this normal, since such an astronomical figure can easily shake one to the core. It's possible that some trouble may arise, since members from each of the great families will be gathered there. In fact, I fear that this man might deliberately manufacture an incident if nothing happens. He may try to take advantage of the confusion that may ensue after an incident. He may then try to make a move favorable to him using today's conflict as cover. The emperor stood up and paced back and forth for a while. He then sighed deeply and mumbled, "If only this talented person were working for me, such a pity." Although this man is smart, but he still needs the backing of those three families. In fact, it will be very difficult for him to stir any storms without a proper support from the Jun family, Tang family, and the prince equivalent. The man in snow-white clothes offered his comforting words. "I am also worried about the point you've just now highlighted. It's vital. This man has somehow persuaded these three families to help one another. It is clear that these three families have friendly relations. Moreover, their friendship seems strong. There was a rumor earlier which said that this idea to sell wine originated out of a bet. The young master of the Jun family, Jun Moxie, and General Dugu Wudi made a wager on the quality of this wine and the price it could sell for. It is said that this strategy was actually devised by Jun Moxie. Though I am somewhat unconvinced by that. However, if it really is that debauchee's doing, then I shall truly regard him in a new light." The emperor laughed gently for a little while. However, he couldn't conceal the color of worry over his eyebrows. This plan is certainly made by someone else. Whoever this man is, he is extremely dangerous and talented. His action will spell chaos regardless of what the motive behind them is. There was a deep scowl on His Majesty's face for a while. Then, his expression changed, and he suddenly smiled. "In any case, this will be a very amusing auction. Would you be interested in accompanying me to that hall, Mr. Yuan? Your Majesty is tempted to go." The white-robed Mr. Yuan raised his head to look at the emperor. The expression in his eyes was extremely clear, like a deep lake whose bottom could be seen easily because there was no impurities in it. His skin seemed smooth like the skin of a newborn baby. It is an interesting matter. Moreover, there is a talented and dangerous person there. Why shouldn't I be tempted? The emperor narrowed his eyes. How can I not go to this lively event when this matter will have a profound and far-reaching effect on the capital's state of affairs? And it's always good to get new experiences. I also want to taste a wine which costs over 10,000 taels per bottle. Mr. Yuan stood up in a free and easy manner as the hint sincere of smile surfaced on his infant-like face. He gently chuckled. In that case, please allow this old man to accompany your majesty on your trip. With you by side, I'm certain to succeed. The emperor smiled and got up. He spoke as they walked out. However, first we need to look for somebody who has an invitation since we don't. The three princes and Princess Ling Meng have received the invitation cards, if one is to believe the reports. Therefore, is your majesty thinking of following the princess? Mr. Wen winked. The two men smiled in a tacit understanding. I can also conveniently check up on my three sons as they fight and scheme against each other. It ought to be quite amusing. What could be better? The emperor smiled in a profound manner. However, there was still a wrinkle of worry on his smiling face. Has Brother Zhu eaten anything in the past few days? I haven't heard much about it. Mr. Wen was walking abreast with the emperor. He smiled as he said, this problem of his should be dealt with. However, that grandson of Tang Wangli is too immature. There's no hope for his future. He scared that cleanliness-obsessed man by disseminating his bodily wastes on him. As chance has it, little Zhu had stepped forward just then. And though he had managed to stay clean for so many years now, the poor man's spout was filled with. He referred to Zhu as little Zhu. That man's status was seemingly higher than the people from Zhu's generation. Though, it would seem that he was even younger than debauchee. In fact, he looked closer to Jun Wuyi's age by his facial appearance. It was very strange. Ha ha! The emperor burst out laughing. He turned his face towards the side, and addressed an old court eunuch as, have the imperial kitchen find a good remedy for eunuch Zhu. Ask them to concoct some kind of mixture to whet his appetite. And then feed him something. He doesn't eat anything at all nowadays. How is that good? The old eunuch solemnly and respectfully accepted his orders. He was quite close to the emperor, and had served him for over 30 years. When Xian Yin was also aware of this, the idea behind this order was clear. On one hand, Zhu's matter required his personal presence. But His Majesty couldn't drop from his status in order to sort such trivial matters either. A smile spread across the emperor's face as he watched the eunuch leave. It seemed as if he was reflecting on something from the past. I, however, haven't found it easy to go outside the palace. Those days. I truly cherish them a lot. That ingenious person will not be able to hide himself now that your Majesty has personally set out to uncover his secret plan. Mr. Wen smiled gracefully. Or perhaps your Majesty may acquire a very talented person because of this action. Wen would like to congratulate your Majesty in advance. I hope so. His Majesty the Emperor smiled faintly, while the expression in his eyes fluctuated. He seemed to be harboring some doubts. He was constantly mouthing a name, but hadn't mentioned it loud. If one were to look closely, they would realize that he was constantly trying to say 3 words, Jun Wuyi. A cold ray of light flashed in his eyes. As the sun rose gradually in the sky to mark daybreak, the last of great families started to arrive. First to arrive was the Donghua family. This family had the reputation of being one of the premier great families of the capital. They had showed initiative by arriving with 8 major members from their family. They came in riding atop big horses, all of them gallant and full of spirit. Donghua had arrived along with his 7 burly nephews, heroes and legends bravely rushing forward. They were crowding around a small green palanquin. They appeared similar to 8 majestic black bears which had become exhilarated by the scent of good honey. This brigade of men and horses finally stopped in front of the main door. One command sounded, and they positioned themselves in uniformity. The door of that small green palanquin opened, and one graceful, fair, and pretty figure came out. Her eyebrows were like distant hills. Her almond eyes were joyful, while her cheeks were like peaches. Her face was simply picturesque. All kinds of charms, immense loveliness and sweetness poured out of this youthful girl. She seemed very fresh, pure and delicate. Dugu Xiao Yi, one of Tianxiang City's peerless beauties, had arrived. Jun Moxie's eyes would have popped out if he were there. In front of his eyes would be this gentle and beautiful woman, who had undergone a miraculous transformation. She was no longer that violent girl who yelled at him, fought with him, and beat him up every day. A major member from the Jun family showed up to welcome the Dugu family. Upon their arrival, Jun Wuyi, the third son of the Jun family, waited for them at the end of the flower-flanked path. He sat perfectly straight on his wheelchair. He was dressed in clean black clothes. His facial features seemed sharp, as if cut by a knife. Nevertheless, there was a faint smile on his face, which enhanced his graceful bearing. A white-clothed youngster was unhurriedly pushing his wheelchair. Elder brother Dugu, Jun Wuyi, cupped his hands, showing a trace of a genial expression. You have arrived. Younger brother Jun, Dugu Wudi, jumped down from his horse and took large strides forward. Jun family is opening a major business. So why wouldn't older brother come over and show his support? Why have you toiled to receive us personally? I, your older brother, could have walked in myself. We are no strangers to you. There's no harm in greeting people. But elder brother is the only one in the city who actually deserves such importance. Therefore, how could I ever neglect my duties if my brother arrives here? Jun Wuyi smiled. Then he gestured with his hands as an expectant look in his emerged eyes. Elder brother Dugu, please enter. Dugu Wudi immediately looked up, and his eyes were immediately wrapped with layer upon layer of happiness. Third brother Jun, please. He reached and positioned himself behind Jun Wuyi. He then nudged the white-clothed youngster who was standing behind the wheelchair to the side as he laughed loudly. You take a break. I will push my third brother inside. Jun Wuyi's body leaned back comfortably so as to allow Dugu Wudi to push the wheelchair. They chatted as Jun Wuyi showed the way forward. The atmosphere had suddenly become very harmonious, and it seemed as if both sides were a bit emotional. Could it be that the years of the past had returned once again? Dugu Wudi was laughing loudly. He was elated from the bottom of his heart. He quietly wiped the tears which appeared in his tiger-like eyes. He couldn't help but sigh in happiness. Today this younger brother has forgiven me. He called me elder brother once again. I'm so happy. I have no regrets anymore. 10 years of suffering and silence, and no mention of the events that had occurred. But it had all been melted away by these few words. The two men seemed extremely happy, and talked cheerfully. However, it seemed to everyone else that these two great generals were still enveloped in a thick layer of sentiment owing to that bloody event from the past. There was strange connection between these two iron-blooded soldiers. Jun Wuyi had dispelled the sword of resentment with his smile. 10 years of conflict and hatred had been obliterated with just a smile. This opportune moment had announced the end of the uneasiness these two great generals had been carrying in their hearts for a decade. The Dugu family's 7 burly and ox-like individuals remained silent, contrary to their usual personality. They understood the importance of this moment, and deliberately modulated their breathing for the fear of disturbing the two brothers whose bond had been molded over the course of numerous battles. They had carried the glory of the entire army and the entire of Tianxiang Empire on their shoulders. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes became red as she sobbed quietly. She was admittedly too young to properly appreciate the special camaraderie between these two men. However, as his daughter, She had always known the matter which had troubled her father's heart from the beginning. Debauchee had been a straightforward man throughout his life, and had never felt the need to regret. However, there was one matter he had always vaguely regretted. Jun Xie. Debauchee would get drunk every year on Jun Xie's death anniversary. He would inevitably burst out crying even though he was an extremely tough and strong warrior. Moreover, he wouldn't even try to cover up his loud crying. He would cry his guts out. Debauchee had never in his life shed tears so many times. And all of this happened because the person who had died was his sworn brother. Debauchee had often seen her father enter his study in the middle of the night. He would sigh endlessly as he would stroke the sword which Jun Xie had gifted to him. Today, however, Jun Xie had eliminated this hard-to-dispel conundrum in Debauchee's mind with just a smile. How could Debauchee not be pleased? How could she not cry? How could she not be moved to tears? Following after the Debauchee family came another important one, the Song family. The Tang and the Meng family arrived successively, in accordance to the appointed time. The magnificent jewel hall which was in close proximity across the street had also received an invitation card. Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong were clad in white like always. They arrived accompanying the flower-like Han Yen Meng. And at that moment, please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 243. Collision in front of the aristocratic hall. An imposing bronze-colored chariot was galloping at full speed. The 4 pairs of beastly warhorses which pulled it were level 4 Xian beasts. A tender and beautifully blooming golden mum's flower adorned the carriage, and shone with an abnormal brilliance. 8 horsemen valiantly strode around the chariot on their imposing horses. The Murong family had arrived at last. On the face of it, it would appear that the Murong family could not compare to the Li family in terms of power and influence. It couldn't compare to the Jun and the Debauchee families either. In reality, though, the Murong family was actually one of the most influential families inside Tianxiang City. After all was said and done, it was the most ancient and the robust family. Moreover, it also has the most intimate relationship with the imperial family. Murong family's influence simply couldn't be ignored. On top of that, the Murong family was the only family which was related to the imperial family by the means of a marriage. None of the other noble families enjoyed this honor. It could be said that the Li family was powerful enough to disrupt all levels of society. Moreover, Li Yuan was considered to be an outstanding youngster with a lot of impressive talent. However, even though he had set his heart to win over Princess Ling Meng 3 years ago, the emperor had neither consented to this, nor given any opinion on it. The Jun family was a family of martyrs, which had sacrificed many men to the service of the nation. The grandfather Jun then had no choice but to lay down his self-respect in front of Tianxiang Empire's emperor, to seek a relationship by marriage. This proposal was also tactfully declined. No one could trust that debauchee, even though the others were considered reliable. Therefore, if the Jun family's proposal to join the 2 families by marriage was refused, then one could imagine how difficult it had to be. The Murong family's importance in the eyes of the imperial family was extremely difficult to replace. Some time ago, Murong Qian Jun had passed wrong information. This had created a huge commotion, and a big mishap had occurred wherein Jun Zhantien had brought about a purge in the capital city. By the end of it, he had massacred almost 1/3 of the imperial cabinet ministers in that purge. There is no need to say that if it had been anyone else, they would have been executed 10,000 times over this matter. However, Murong Qian Jun was simply removed from his post to never be hired again. Nothing more. This clearly showed how close the Murong family and the imperial family were, and how big an influence the Murong family had on the latter. Therefore, how could anyone ever look down upon their power and influence? The carriage suddenly came to a stop. The 8 horsemen jumped down from their steeds with a loud thud. Amongst these, the guard in the lead turned a handle and set the carriage free of its horses. Then, he swiftly moved on to the ornamented door and opened it. He then stood up straight like a ramrod, holding the door open with one hand. A short while later, a tall and handsome youngster walked out from within with a straight posture. It was none other than Murong Jun. Then a pair of tender feet stretched from the door, marking the arrival of a young lady, clad in splendid bright yellow clothes. Her face reflected arrogance as she leisurely got down from the carriage. Soon after, an old man appeared. He coughed and trembled as he got down from the carriage, with 2 men supporting his frame from underneath. The bystanders inhaled a breath of cold air. The Murong family was worthy of the aristocratic hall in every sense of the word. The Grand Murong family had surprisingly sent their second-in-command, who was the old master Murong Feng Yuan's younger brother, Murong Feng Yu. Perhaps, their reputation was even a match to the Jun family, the Tang family, and even the prince equivalent. Murong Jun and the young maiden dressed in yellow supported Murong Feng Yu as they started to walk inside. Murong family? It's quite extraordinary, right? But they are very arrogant. Suddenly, a cold taunt was heard, which was accompanied by a peculiar sneer. Every person of the Murong family stiffened, and many of their men placed their hands on the hilts of their swords. All of them looked angry. Who in Tianxiang City had dared to mock the Murong family? Especially at a time when some of their leading members were present? Weren't they afraid for their lives? This had never happened before. On turning to see who it was, their gazes fell upon 2 middle-aged people wearing white clothes and cold expressions. One of them had an angry look spread across his face. His snow-white gown had been bathed in the mud and dirt. A beautiful young lady stood beside him. It was Xiao Han's 3-man party. Those without power simply aren't capable of doing the unprecedented. However, what if the insider was more than a mortal? The Silver Blizzard City was simply too high to reach in the eyes of a worldly family. Xiao Han had been feeling that everything was going against him lately, which had left him feeling very gloomy of late. He had become quite sullen since his arrival at Tianxiang City. Previously, he had walked over to the Jun family to insult his rival over his disability, but hadn't expected the younger generation of the family to make him look like fool and hurt him. Moreover, Mu Shuatong had added more insult to his injury by beating him up further. However, what had made him really furious was when Han Yanyao actually sent a gift to Jun Wu Yi in secrecy. He simply couldn't bear the flame of jealousy. After that, his own nephew was seriously beaten up by a mysterious master, shortly after the boy's arrival in the Tianxiang city. Fortunately, the boy's recovery was not an issue after he had been diagnosed and treated using some of the best medicines available. However, this only meant that he had failed to take proper care of his nephew. Then he heard the news that the Jun family's cripple had unexpectedly recovered fully from his affliction. This eventually pushed Xiao Han to his breaking point. Right now, 3 families had joined hands to open the aristocratic hall right opposite the magnificent jewel hall. They were obviously trying to compete with the magnificent hall. However, the part most unbearable for him was that one of the members in this 3-family alliance was the Jun family. He could not tolerate this. Then, he had strived hard to find his place as the magnificent jewel hall's representative for this event. His mental status had improved after he had managed to oust Mu Shuatong's strong opposition to the same. However, then a carriage had splashed mud across his entire body just as he was walking over to the aristocratic hall's doorstep. Could he really have no respite in life? He was almost on the verge of exploding to death because of the anger he felt. He rained curses unrestrained as he smashed his heel into the ground. The impact of his stomp was so forceful that he dislocated his own heel. Such was Xiao Han's present mental anguish. The anger in Xiao Han's heart kept increasing, and it soon spread to his guts as he looked fiercely at the Murong family members who had just gotten off the carriage. Anyone could tell that his stare was deliberately meant to provoke them, since his eyes had no trace of benevolence. On one side was Xiao Han, who was obviously not in a jolly mood, while on the other was Murong Qianjun, who was as angry as the former. After all, someone had insulted them in front of the entire Tianxiang city. He lifted his leg to rush over. You really wish to court death so early in the morning. This youngster had been faced with several adversities of his own. His pursuit of Princess Ling Meng had been largely unsuccessful. Moreover, he had been relieved of his duties at the imperial palace after he had spread that incorrect message. Hence, it was rather obvious that he was also quite frustrated with his life, and was just looking for someone to vent it all out on. The old man Murong Fengyu used one hand to cover his coughing mouth as he pulled the youngster back with his other hand. Murong Fengyu's movements were not at all quick, and seemed exasperatingly slow. However, he outstretched his hand just in time to block the dashing Murong Qianjun's path. Murong Fengyu was quite experienced, and his eyes could make out that Xiao Han and the others in his company were of extraordinary origins. He had been able to decipher all that from just the curses this man had thrown at his family. Moreover, seeing that the three of them were clothed in pure white and had walked out from the magnificent jewel hall, he had managed to guess the opposite party's origins. What did you say? You little B*********? Xiao Han's murderous mood violently flashed on his face. Xiao Han hailed from the Silver City, and was wearing the formal dress of a member of the younger generation. Having any other color upon one's dressing was tabooed in the Silver Blizzard City. This youngster had sinned by coloring his robes in a different color, something they would only do when in mourning. Not just Xiao Han, but anyone from the Silver Blizzard City would have been angered by this. Cool. This youngster is truly rude and rotten. He would like to apologize to you, Mr. Murong Fengyu's vision seemed blurred as he looked at Xiao Han. The thick-skinned person appeared quite sincere, while his smile resembled half a mum's flower, whose petals had blown away in the wind and rain. Just by looking at Mr. S. dress, one can see that he is actually an outstanding hero of the #1 secret powerhouse of this world, the Silver Blizzard City. How does one address the unknown Mr.? And how is the Xiao family's Xiao Buyu? Xiao Han's body shook a little as he became even more depressed. This old man was too crafty. He had first compensated for his loss by apologizing, and then he had brought Xiao Buyu into the discussion. In this way, he had faintly pointed out that he knew the man while reasserting his old age at the same time. This rendered the man from the younger generation of the Xiao family incapable of venting out his anger. Xiao Buyu was world famous. Therefore there was always a possibility that the man could be lying. However, this was the Murong family's second-in-command. Moreover, he had stated this in front of many people, and so it was quite improbable that he would be claiming a fake relationship. Xiao Han looked towards the old man and somehow controlled his anger. The Xiao elder is indebted for your concern. He. We aren't strangers. There is no need to speak in such a polite manner. Murong Fengyu narrowed his eyes and lowered his stance. We were wrong in the matter which had just occurred, and my Murong family will confess properly to you. In return we hope that you will show us kindness. Xiao Han groaned heavily. There is no need for this. Murong Fengyu relaxed a bit as he knew that the matter had now been resolved. He opened his eyes and glanced at the Murong Qianjun ferociously. He then immediately looked at Murong Qianjun, who was staring at him blankly. Then, his gaze fell upon the beautiful young maiden standing next to Xiao Han. She appeared as beautiful as a flower which had managed to bloom even in the icebergs. He couldn't help but contemplate in his mind. If Qianjun can woo this girl, won't I then be able to pull my family into a relationship with the Silver Blizzard City? However, this matter, I must take proper time to decide. This young lady is just a piece of swan meat to my Murong family, no matter what position she holds in the Silver Blizzard City. At this point, the sound of several horse hooves could be heard in the distance. This was soon followed by the arrival of many ranks of troops. These were in fact the three princes. However, riding in front of them was the carriage of Princess Ling Meng. There wasn't enough time for Murong Fengyu to properly exchange his greetings. Therefore, he hastily greeted Xiao Han and then walked inside, with the support of the people he had brought along. At this moment the sound of another chariot was heard coming from a different street. This carriage belonged to the prince equivalent, and had arrived at the same time. These highly placed personalities had arrived at the last minute, and all at the same time. Their arrival had been skillfully timed. Princess Ling Meng sat inside her carriage, with burdened thoughts plaguing her mind. She had not wanted to come today. It was neither her hobby, nor did she like keeping up false appearances. However, her father, the emperor, had decided that he wanted to look around and had requested that she come here immediately. Then he and Mr. Wen had disguised themselves, and had followed her to this gathering. Left with no other option, Princess Ling Meng had to comply. Yet she did not know what her father was planning. He had kept ordering her carriage to stop and then proceed for the entire journey, forcing the three carriages carrying her elder brothers to do the same in the back. It had almost seemed as if he was intentionally trying to manufacture trouble for the three sons by forcing their carriages to collide on the broad road. As a result, the princess hadn't found any peace over the course of the entire journey. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 244. Young Master Jun's Rogue Tricks. The fact was that the Princess Ling Meg hadn't anticipated that the three princes would follow the emperor. Shockingly, their carriages had traveled on the road side by side and had kept bashing sideways into each other. Luckily, this street was wide enough to accommodate them. Otherwise, perhaps even the houses on the side would have been affected by the three, and would have collapsed. I still don't know what father aims to achieve by this plan of his. Could it be that he is not satisfied with the usual infighting, or does not consider it fierce enough? Would he have those three compete, expose their weaknesses, and humiliate themselves in front of everyone? With my three elder brothers' current behavior, this is not entirely impossible. However, the scene that the Princess Ling Meng had just imagined would not come true. Because the carriages of the three princes had managed to battle their way into getting cramped, they had also managed to reach their destination at the same time, without anyone falling behind the other. As a result, the tension between them had quickly eased. The street where the magnificent Jewel Hall and the Aristocratic Hall were located was very wide. However, it still had its limitations, and the three princes' convoy ended up cramming the street to its very limits. In fact, their carriages ended up crashing into each other on the sides. Though this wasn't a very opportune thing, fortunately there was another carriage which lacked timing. This carriage belonged to the prince equivalent. There were 5 royal carriages present, with 4 of them crammed up together and knocking against each other. I'm afraid that it is very difficult to avoid a problematic situation in such circumstances. Is all this really accidental? Or is it intentional? This situation made Princess Ling Meng somewhat dizzy. The only thing worth celebrating here was that the emperor's brother, in the end, was also a part of the imperial family. Since he was one of their own, if her three elder brothers agreed to yield even a little bit, she was convinced that mediating this matter would not be too difficult. Several youngsters clad in white with the responsibility to welcome the guests came out from the aristocratic hall. However, they were left staring foolishly at the situation. The street where the magnificent Jewel Hall and the Aristocratic Hall were located was considered the best location within the Tianxiang city. It was the widest street in the city. In fact, this street was actually capable of accommodating 3 carriages at once without them crashing into each other. Needless to say, a pile-up such as this had never occurred before here. Moreover, because the magnificent Jewel Hall was also present on this street, no event had ever escalated to a situation like this. People who were eligible to come here usually knew the origins of the magnificent Jewel Hall. No one was foolish enough to cause trouble on this street. However, at present, the carriage from the Prince Equivalent's carriage was the first to stop. 2 white-clothed maidservants uncovered the carriage's curtain screen. A child stepped down from the carriage with support. The child was the Equality Prince's son. He was the same boy who Jun Moxie had jokingly dubbed adorable little sister Yang Mo. Princess Ling Meng moved aside in order to make way for the Equality Prince. He was a member of her own family. Moreover, excluding her father, he was the only other patriarch of the royal family in his generation. Even though her father was aboard her carriage at that moment, she still moved aside. Not to mention, she was also very fond of her little cousin. On top of that, the Equality Prince was also one of the owners of the Aristocratic Hall. Therefore, it was only proper for her to allow him to proceed inside first. However, the situation with the convoys of the 3 princes was still the same. They were still battling it out with each other to arrive first, and things only got worse as they made their way towards the gate. This caused a rather noisy ruckus. In the midst of the princes' group, there was a black-robed person whose cold eyes watched the 3 princes' convoys attentively. He observed the activity in and around each of the 3 carriages. However, he did not say a single word throughout, though his eyes were as sharp as a knife. By now, Jun Moxie had already received information about all of this. Faced with such an embarrassing situation, he could not help but rush out. Young Master Jun incessantly cursed in rage. You 3 brothers cannot distinguish good from bad? Looks like your commotions are going to create a lot of trouble for me. If I had known earlier, I would have sent the invitation to only one of you to avoid all this annoyance. This is an important moment and I still have a lot of work to finish. I have painstakingly managed this huge place for the auction. Do you think this is a joke? Be good, you 3 dirty things. I don't have time to play with you. Fatty Tang and Song Shang were the main hosts of the auction. They obviously could not come out. Even if they did, it was not certain that they were capable of handling such a situation. After all, the status of these 3 people was just too high. Because of that, they simply could not use force to handle this predicament. Admittedly, Jun Xie, the 3rd master of the Jun family, could handle this. However, if Jun Xie appeared personally, it was possible that he would get involved in the rivalry of these princes. That really wouldn't be of much help. Therefore, he would be an inappropriate choice for now. As for the other candidate, General Woody could also possibly come out and roar at these 3. Most likely, he would be impartial as well. The three princes were too high to reach in other people's eyes. Nevertheless, they did not hold any importance in the generals. However, these three were Jun Moxie's guests. Drawing support from external sources wouldn't be pleasant. Besides, Jun Moxie figured that even if he won that bet, he wouldn't have the nerve to accept General Dugu's compensation if he were to truly exploit the man's power to settle this dispute. Other people had helped you solve this problem. Therefore, the great General Dugu Wudi was out of the question. It could be then assumed that Jun Moxie was the only remaining candidate. However, even though Jun Moxie's status was still far below the three princes, he still had to handle this matter. Hence, using the Jun family's renowned debauchee's reputation, which continued to devolve into that of a hoodlum and a rogue, was no doubt an effective strategy. Therefore, after receiving the information, Jun Wuyi and Tang Yuan immediately looked at the young Master Jun's face. Moxie, it is important that this matter is settled. It will require some roguelike means. Hence, only you are qualified to handle this, Jun Wuyi had said. What manner of calling me out is this? Why is it necessary to compare me to a rogue or a scoundrel? Young Master Jun became gloomy. Boss, as they say, it takes an evil to deal with an evil. Your personal involvement would be the best option, Tang Yuan patted as he flattered him. Fatty's flattery left the young Master Jun raging in anger. It takes an evil to deal with evil? How am I an evil person? These derogatory words of flattery made the Jun family's young master curse. Motherf **** cur. What did he say? Do you really think I'm that evil? This is really ridiculous. However, a problem of this level could only be solved by someone very able. Therefore, Jun Moxie hurried to the scene where all the noise was arising from. However, before he could reach his designated destination, he ran into Xiao Han, Mu Shuetong and Han Yan Yao's younger sister. A high-ranking member of the Murong family was also accompanying them. Mu Shuetong smiled slightly and nodded, whereas Xiao Han snorted at him coldly. He then arrogantly raised his head and pretended not to notice Jun Moxie. Only the little girl looked at Jun Moxie directly in the face, and then caught the lapel of his jacket. She pouted her mouth as she glared at him and said, Jun family's youngster, greet your young aunt and she will be good to you. Jun Moxie was not in a good mood at the time. Hence, he rolled his eyes and replied, I have already told you that your elder sister and my third uncle aren't married yet. Moreover, all we can consider right now is that they have only shown their intention to marry. So can you please shut your little mouth? Oh, you know something, young aunt? Looking at you. Your chest is as flat as a slab. Your waist and your butt are not at all curved. Looking at your hair, it seems you are yet to shed your feathers. Even the smell of breast milk is yet to wear off from you. Yet you are under this delusion that you are of from this man's elder generation? You first wait for yourself to properly develop into an adult before talking to me and pretending to be of my older generation. Jun Moxie had spoken these words out of sheer irritation. In reality, he had been given no reason to talk like that. The growth period in girls starts earlier than in boys. Even though Han Yan Yao's little sister was 15.5 years old, her figure hadn't yet fully matured. However, it could be said that it was beginning to show promise. If she were compared to Dugu Xiao Yi, she wouldn't come out lacking in any aspect. Therefore, in no way was the Jun family's young master accurate when he called her figure as flat as a slab. You. Han Yan Yao's sister heard the young Master Jun's senseless taunt, and stamped her foot. She could not help feeling a mixture of shame and anger. She angrily stamped her small foot on the ground once again, as her pretty and petite face turned red. Then suddenly, her eyes changed their direction and she said in a careful manner, "I don't care. However, you look like you're in a bit of a hurry. So I will not let you pass until you call me young aunt. Do whatever you want. In any case, I'm not worried." Her tiny hand tightened its grasp on the lapel of his jacket. Her status was quite high in the Silver Blizzard City even though she was the youngest. However, her status didn't matter because every other individual in the city was of an older generation. Naturally, she had to address them as such: teacher, master, uncle, great-uncle, grandfather, great-ancestor. Moreover, since she was the youngest in her family, she even had to address the people from her own generation as elder sister or elder brother. Ever since she had come to Tianxian City and had met the Jun family's youngest son, she had wanted the little devil to show her some respect. Especially when she realized that if her elder sister married his uncle, Jun Moxie would surprisingly be considered to be of a younger generation than her. That was indeed a joyous occasion for her. It was like she had found a treasure in a place where she had least expected it. How could she let him off so easily? She would naturally pester him and fight tooth and nail for the honor of being called young aunt. Hey! Jun Moxie could listen to the sounds coming from outside, and they were getting louder and louder with every passing moment. Therefore, he suddenly stomped. "Well, I'm afraid to inform that calling you that is absolutely out of the question. Young pig. Is young pig fine?" He had sounded a bit vague, and had said these words very softly. Hence, the little girl wasn't able to listen to it properly. Even though it had seemed somewhat fishy to her, she had still thought he had just called her young aunt. Pleased with herself, she raised her little chin, puffed up her small chest, and released her grip on Jun Moxie's jacket as she waved her hand and said, "Go, well-behaved child. But on one condition in the future. You will say, 'young aunt,' before you say my name. And this young aunt will protect you." It was as if Jun Moxie had deceived his way into getting an imperial pardon. He disappeared like a wisp of smoke. "Oh, he just now called me young aunt, why doesn't it seem right?" The young woman suddenly came to herself. "He called you young pig when he was supposed to call you young aunt." Murong Qianjun had been seeking to woo Princess Ling Meng, and Jun Moxie had been a tough opponent. Moreover, this young woman was also quite beautiful. Hence, he immediately resorted to making things worse for Jun Moxie, in the hope of winning a favor with this young maiden. Han Yan Meng's mouth resembled a teapot as she pouted. She turned around with great regret in her heart, only to see Jun Moxie's back in the distance. She clenched her tiny fists. "Get lost, you be *tch. Xiao Han and Mu Shuatong fiercely glared at the same time. "Shut up." Both men from the Silver How can you say this matter does not concern me? Third Majesty, you have just intercepted the third great boss of our aristocratic hall and are preaching to him endlessly. This is directly resulting in our auction getting delayed. So how does this matter not concern me? Is such a thing reasonable anywhere under the sun? Jun Moxie looked at his face. In the eyes of the young Master Jun, this person was someone who could only depend on people from his father's generation. In fact, this man was unlikely to survive if he were left to his own measures. Moreover, what made him even more useless was the fact that he was ambitious, even though he did not even have the least bit of talent. Jun Moxie pretended a loft and ambitious demeanor with a straight chest. His body was swaying a bit, and it seemed that he was unable to stand steadily as he continued. This small matter relates to my aristocratic hall earning some shining white money and glistening yellow gold. In fact, this is important matter because when we make money, we pay taxes to the country. If you obstruct it, then you will obstruct our country's taxes. If you obstruct those taxes, it will influence an important means of people's livelihood. Are you trying to revolt to the system? As the young Master Jun's mouth danced, his saliva sprinkled everywhere. Some of it even made its way to the third prince's clothing, including the hat that was fastened to his head. The third prince trembled with anger. What nefarious nonsense are you talking, Jun Moxie? You really think I'd want to revolt? Jun Moxie looked contemptuously. Have you finally let down the people of Tianxiang City? The common people of this country provide you with a life of luxury, one of high position and great wealth, of ruling status and powerful senior positions, and yet you still want to revolt. You, why? Don't you have any humanity? Jun Moxie appeared to be brimming with grief and indignation. You were born into the imperial family. In fact, you are one of the 3 magnificent princes, and yet you are unsatisfied? Don't tell me that you have determined to set brothers against each other, just so that you can climb up and attain the senior-most position. Are you willing to give up on family for that? Could it be that the imperial family is not your flesh and blood? The third prince felt very foolish. This idiot is speaking non-stop of hatred and bitter hardship. He is blaming me in indignation, while the words he says about me are enough to show that he has a heart of cruel and unscrupulous intentions. Moreover, if I continue to let Jun Moxie speak, I do not know what he'll say next. In fact, thanking everyone under the sun wouldn't be enough if I live through this. This idiot doesn't even know what topics are a taboo. How dare he say such things? You are a spendthrift and a debauchee who doesn't know that these topics are to be avoided. And you think I'm the same as you? Suddenly, the third prince started to feel ashamed, as it was his faction which would lose out now. What's worse was that if a resolute person delivered the news of this to father's ears. The third prince hurriedly stepped back as he firmly covered his mouth. The voice that came out from it was almost pleading in nature. Young Master Jun. You don't say such things. You. I'll die, maybe I made a mistake. I will not obstruct you. The corner of Jun Moxie's mouth rose as his appearance became tranquil. Then he groaned once, and his expression immediately became as radiant. Whoa! It is seldom that the third prince and Princess Ling Meng both honor my rustic hall with their presence. Wow! The aristocratic hall and I are indeed very overwhelmed by your kindness. Please come in. Do come in. Then turning around, he roared. What are you all doing? The third prince has been waiting for such a long time, and none of you have greeted him, or invited him in. I'm getting really angry. You've neglected His Majesty. This is a serious accusation. Who was managing this? I'll personally escort His Majesty and the princess inside the hall. Ha! Escort them into the hall. Everyone had a strange expression on their faces. He wants to escort the third prince and the princess into the hall. Do you really think that the princess and the princes actually need an invitation to enter? That's just what you think. This trip has really been worth it. Now, I've seen everything. There were people standing in all directions. Even though they had all witnessed his actions, not many saw their true nature. For example, what's happening? The first prince asked his men with a gloomy expression. It's quite difficult to say, an individual with a goat-like mustache replied. This young Master Jun is very arrogant. It seems that he is quite keen on keeping with the rumors about him. He is certainly an ignorant and thoughtless individual. But nevertheless, the outcome of today's incident was certainly quite clever. If Your Majesty is unable to get a grasp on what is happening and wishes to incorporate that man into his own side, I suggest he should observe this man carefully. Everyone else sitting beside him nodded in agreement. This fellow is not what I expected him to be. I believed that he wouldn't be able to deal with the problem. In fact, I had merely laughed him off as a joke. However, that drama has certainly stayed on mind. The eldest prince nodded and smiled. However, this sort of rogue methods always give me a headache. Do you think it's really worthwhile to observe him carefully? Haha. They smiled together. As for another example, this rogue conduct makes me feel extremely sick, just like it did in the past. The second prince observed Jun Moxie from afar, while making no effort to conceal the look of disgust in his eyes. Cheng De Chao also gnashed his teeth said, such scums are a disgrace on the face of earth. This young master of the Jun family is simply unbearable. If weren't for his family's name, I would have killed him a long time ago. His eyes flashed coldly at that moment. Jun Moxie, I have already arrived. And I see that you still act as arrogantly even after all these days. I will pay you back in double for last time's humiliation. I await your death. Beside him, the white-bearded Fang Bo Wen looked on in contemplation and then said slowly, today's matter is quite strange. He shook his head after contemplating a bit more. Very strange. The black-robed man behind Princess Ling Meng spoke quickly, in a low voice. This is the rumored third young master of the Jun family. Jun Moxie. He seems childish even at this age. Even though he isn't in reality. He is indeed a very interesting youngster. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 204 I am bullying you? Are you kidding me? Jun Moxie twisted his posterior to look at him arrogantly, and then twisted his waist to the other side. The lower part of his body swayed back and forth in a rhythmic manner. Bully you. Bully you. I want to bully you. Puff. Chengda Chao glared at Jun Moxie with eyes full of boundless hatred. Such big eyes. This donkey is trying to scare me. Are you threatening me? Bah! Jun Moxie spat. He then turned around to face the second prince, who was looking at him murderously. The young Master Jun laughed as he explained. You mustn't by any means. You mustn't misunderstand my words, these words really were directed at you. His explanation only added more fuel to the fire. There was a frown across the second prince's forehead as he snorted and walked inside after flicking his sleeve. Everyone followed suit. However, from time to time, someone would find it difficult to control their snigger. They would eventually clap a hand on their mouth and cough in order to muffle their laughter. This was especially the case with the two people who were accompanying Princess Ling Meng. These two men had no qualms about laughing, which made Jun Moxie notice them in particular amongst everyone else. Jun Moxie was quite surprised to notice that Princess Ling Meng's entourage had two men clad in black, who didn't even look very young. The princess came without any handmaidens? What is going on? The young Master Jun was very suspicious of things and paid careful attention to this matter. Though he didn't show any indication of his suspicions on the surface and was laughing and joking along with everyone, he was still mindful of everything. These two people are quite amiable and easy to get along with. Moreover, these two people have beards. So they aren't court eunuchs. Princess Ling Meng doesn't look like she is being forced. So that means she knows them well. It also seems that the princess respects both these individuals unconditionally. These two men definitely aren't ordinary people. On top of that, Yi Gu Han is unexpectedly not at her side. His aura is not anywhere within even 30 meters of her. What reasons can he possibly have to leave Princess Ling Meng alone like this? Judging by Yi Gu Han's temperament, who would he instill so much trust in the Tianxiang city on? This is quite confusing. Or maybe, the answer to this riddle is in the identity of the two people accompanying her. If so, then understanding who these two people are will make everything clear. Just then, Jun Moxie suddenly remembered hearing a rumor that Yi Gu Han and the Empress had been close friends since childhood. Could it be that I'm overthinking such a small incident? But why are these two here? I could understand the situation clearly if it really was him, but who is the other person with him? It seems that I have no knowledge of this person. Jun Moxie contemplated incessantly. Up ahead, the entry point to the aristocratic hall's auctioning chambers had been flanked by two large osmanthus flowers. Their stem and leaves were lush green, while their petals were golden. In fact, the blooming flower showed no signs of withering, and its rich and strong fragrance filled the entire area. Everyone was quite surprised when the doors opened and they saw the big hall inside. One could even call it a public square owing to the amount of space available. The young Master Jun had worked very hard to create this effect. Almost all the adjoining rooms to this hall had been brought into its fold. The columns used to support this linkage had been carved with shapes of dragons and phoenixes. 100 tables were neatly arranged inside. Not more, and not less, just 100. There was only one chair behind every table. 2 additional chairs had been placed some distance away from each table. These chairs had a small coffee table to keep them company. A pair of bonsai plants had been placed on each side of every table. These bonsai plants had lush green leaves along with tender and beautiful flowers. There was a distance of at least 3 meters between every subsequent table. Moreover, the distance between any two adjoining tables was the same. This setup had been arranged keeping Fatty Tang in mind. Therefore, even a person of Fatty's dimensions could move around with ease here. That being said, Fatty was one of a kind. It was almost impossible to find another person with his build under the heavens. Over 300 people had entered the hall, but unexpectedly it did not feel crowded. In fact, it felt quite spacious. The air was fresh and clean as the long windows overhead had been opened. Therefore, no one was worried about feeling stuffy. Walking into this hall was like walking into a garden in springtime. It could soothe anyone. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 246. Great Auctioneer, Tang Yuan's interpretation of aristocracy. A faint music floated from upstairs and echoed down in the hall. The musical composition wasn't a rare masterpiece, but no one could see the people who were playing it. Somehow, this added a touch of elegance to this mediocre musical composition. On the floor was a unique green-blue carpet. It was abnormally thick. The people walking on it felt a sense of warmth and luxury even though its color wasn't glamorous in particular. Every table had a postcard with a name on it. The first row was naturally reserved for the royal family. They were the cranes in this flock of chicken. 4 of the tables were designated for their seating. Everyone thought, this aristocratic hall is truly great. Even the royal family hasn't been given a private area. Moreover, people inside this hall felt that they themselves had truly risen in the society. They started to believe that they were in the ranks of genuine nobles since they weren't too far removed from the imperial family. Isn't this what aristocracy means? Everyone except for the members of the royal family felt very cheerful because of this. The second row was for the major families. There was no division in accordance with their ranks. The third row was for the descendants of officials, as well as rich noblemen. And the fourth was reserved for the other rich and powerful of the Tianxiang city. Separating each row was a curtain of pearls hanging from above. This screen hazily covered a part of a person's head sitting ahead, which made it difficult for people to see the person sitting in the row in front of theirs. Every nook and corner stationed a red-crowned crane incense burner. It seemed like these cranes were blowing blue smoke. The smoke was rising spirally in the air. And this wafting smoke made the atmosphere seem more peaceful. Some people had arrived early and had been waiting for half a day. However, they didn't seem one bit impatient. In fact, they seemed to be brimming with vigor and excitement. Dozens of young women wearing light yellow clothes were serving tea in small cups. Their clothes and graceful disposition made them look like butterflies. They looked quite pretty as they moved around easy-mannered, yet with a sense of propriety. There was a milky white tapestry in front of the first row which looked like it had dropped from the sky. The tapestry completely covered what was behind it. It looked like an unusually thick wall. The sound of music stopped. Everyone's spirit rose. Finally, the opening gong of this show has been rung. The tapestry in front of the first row was raised noiselessly, exposing the snow-white platform. Then there was a sudden inflow of bright glittering lights. These lights were refracting from gems mounted in the different positions covering a small perimeter of the platform. There was a desk stationed in the middle. On top of the desk was a hammer, the hammer which would mark the final decision. This arrangement was simply fantastic. In fact, it was such a stark contrast to the magnificent jewel hall setup which was wide known as the best auction house in the entire city that it seemed as if a pheasant had run into a golden phoenix, or a beggar into a prince. Suddenly, an echo of footsteps drew everyone's attention. The sound of these footsteps made everyone curious. What kind of colossal person could be behind such footsteps? The lights turned off. A mountainous fat pile of meat walked in, looking around proudly. Every step he took looked dignified. The fair skin under his black gown made him appear similar to boiled pork in between sprouted bread. This entity bounced about in a lively and a rhythmic manner, taking one step at a time. Since everyone here has received the invitation from our hall, all of you are the real aristocrats of the Tianxiang city. And thus, our honored guests. I, Tang Yuan, am the chief auctioneer of the aristocratic hall. On behalf of this hall, I shall represent the three families comprised of the prince equivalent, the Jun family and the Tang family. I am here to greet the aristocrats on behalf of these families, and extend a very warm welcome to all. Tang Yuan loudly orated what he had memorized by heart. Then, surprisingly, he bowed after he finished speaking. Fatty Tang was in fact still repeating what he had been taught earlier. He was speaking off the speech written on a piece of paper by the young Master Jun. This voluminous write-up was scripted to create a civilized yet materialistic environment. There was a warm and enthusiastic round of applause from the audience, not for anything else, but just the line, Tianxiang City's aristocrats. It did not matter if this praise was genuine or not, because from now on these families could use this title against the people they previously weren't able to stand up to. The aristocratic hall, as the name applies, is the hall where only genuine aristocrats can come. Though, what is an aristocrat? Fatty made great efforts to clasp his hands behind his back. It was a very strenuous task which he had undertaken to put on a formal appearance. As for Fatty getting rid of his weight, one could not say much. He wasn't exactly short in stature, and his limbs were in proportion to his height. Although he wasn't exactly tall and powerful, but his physical build was still a bit too much. However, he could not get rid of that fat right away. And try as he might, he was unable to wrap his arms and clasp them behind his back. Nevertheless, Fatty did his utmost to do it in accordance with Jun Moxie's instructions so as to seem graceful, calm, and hiding a few tricks up his sleeves. Tang Yuan's ego was given a boost since he was aware that this was his moment in the limelight. Though, to everyone else, he looked like a black bear which tried to clasp its hands behind its back in an attempt to walk gracefully. In fact, every step he took looked clumsy to them. However, every individual witnessing this scene was doing their utmost to stifle their laughter. Fatty Tang sweepingly glanced at all sides with dignity. The so-called aristocrat is a man on top who has the best of qualities. For example, this Tang Yuan turned his hand. In the hollow of his palm was a round object. I believe everyone here has tasted this crop and knows it as a potato. Everyone knows that this half a kg crop can be bought at the local market for 3 coins. Hence, this can be considered an ordinary vegetable. However, Tang Yuan stopped at once, and gave a pause since the potato appealed to his appetite. Everyone was confused because this man was talking about nobility, so why had he just pulled out a potato? This thing had never been served as food to the rich and powerful. This half a kg thing which is worth 3 coins is not only cheap, but it also makes convenient meals. All you need to do after getting back home is boil it in water. And then you can eat it. Or perhaps you can cut it into thin slices. In fact, you can continue slicing it as much as you like. Tang Yuan felt as cultured as a great scholar as he uttered these words. He couldn't help but feel proud of himself. And hence, he smiled in cultured manner. However, in the eyes of the nobleman sitting in the audience, it seemed as if the half a kg weighing potato had somehow been pulled out by an elderly female pig. They were left twitching. for it was an unbearable sight. However, in a small tavern, it doesn't matter how a vegetable is cut as long as one can finish making a dish out of it. Then, even a cheap potato can be used to earn 100 times the profit. Tang Yuan spoke in an incessant torrent. A man eating this half a silver coin's worth potato dish at a small tavern is obviously an aristocrat when compared to one consuming the same at home. What aristocrats consume is price. However, even that is of a low level. If a restaurant of a higher class serves the same kind of preparation, but at the cost of 2 to 3 silver coins, then that would naturally be considered of a higher quality. And again, one will still find it justified if one embraces an escort in a brothel at the Spirit Fog Lake who is skilled in her art, even when she draws out a sliced potato and asks for 20 silver coins. In fact, one cannot stop the price from rising if many individuals decide not to sell their bodies afterwards, and only offer the similarly prepared potato. Even 50 silver coins won't be too much. In any case, the aristocrats visiting the Spirit Fog Lake will not worry about a few silver coins. Tang Yuan spoke excitedly since this felt similar to being in a brothel and lecturing a group of its patrons. He continuously winked and smiled in a manner like a man who could understand these things very tacitly. The hall burst laughing with tacit understanding. As was expected, this made several ladies inside the hall frown. But none more than the one who had accompanied the second prince inside the hall. Her beautiful face turned green out of anger. Princess Ling Meng suddenly heard a burst of laughter from her side. On turning her head, she saw her father, the emperor, narrowing his eyes while stroking his beard. His eyes flashed with brilliance as if he had just met an old and intimate friend. It seemed as if he was feeling the same immeasurable cheerfulness inside. He couldn't help but cough, and then did it again more vigorously. He spoke in a low and angry voice. Ahem. Men are not good creatures. His Majesty the Emperor coughed embarrassingly at first. He then lowered his head, and held it with both hands, before raising it again after recalling some old memories. He then sat up straight on his seat, almost like a deadpan. He then thought, D***mn. This fatty almost swayed me. However, such a thing happened to me long back. Naturally, if you go to Tianxiang City's most luxurious restaurant for sliced potato, you will even be in favor of paying 100 silver coins, even if their potatoes aren't that special. Tang Yuan extended his finger, and lightly moved it to and fro like a pendulum. This movement was also in imitation of Jun Moxie. The young master Jun was tall, and his fingers were slender. Therefore, he looked graceful when he made such a gesture himself. Moreover, one could also sense an air of arrogance in addition to grace when Jun Moxie made such movements. Tang Yuan had admired this in secret for a long time. His face lit up after having pulled it off so coquettishly in front of so many people. It should be mentioned that Fatty's expression greatly divulged from the reality. Since looking at him from the audience's point of view, Tang Yuan looked like a motionless fat pig with a carrot jutting out from its hoof, which he was swinging enthusiastically like a pendulum. Many of the audience became stiff, and then shuddered because of this sight. In addition, that unwarranted expression of pride on his face made the hair of every aristocrat stand up with disgust. Even those who possessed extraordinary strength were no exception to this. This fellow is extremely disgusting. 100 silver coins would be enough to buy potatoes to feed a family of 4 for 5 years. However, a person can eat only one sliced potato in a high-level restaurant for that price. Moreover, this staple meal will be the cheapest dish no matter where you eat it. Tang Yuan's arms vibrated as he laughed loudly, and said, "Could it be that such noble people just eat a potato? No. What you eat is elegance. It is grace. What you eat is status. What you eat is your taste. What you eat is also the price. What you eat is the loneliness of sitting at the top. And only true aristocrats can enjoy this feeling. And at this point we can say, ladies and gentlemen, that sitting here in our aristocratic hall is the same as sitting at the best restaurant in Tianxiang City. Tang Yuan shouted himself hoarse. Each and every muscle in his body shivered as he jumped about emotionally with a fierce look on his face. This is the genuine aristocratic paradise. Even the water you drink here will be considered a genuine aristocratic commodity. As mentioned before, what we drink is not just water, but the loneliness of being at the top. To be alone as to experience solitude is the true mark of a genuine aristocrat. A thunderous applause erupted since Fatty's words were well received by the audience. In fact, the applause continued to resonate for a while. In another room upstairs, Jun Moxie laughed. Fatty just said that genuine aristocrats consume sliced potatoes and plain water in solitude. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 247. Jun Moxie's first abduction. Jun Moxie's head shook as he broke into laughter. Beside him, even little Yang Mo was laughing. Though he didn't understand the true meaning behind those words, the little rascal was aware that the combination of sliced potato and warm water wasn't delicious. Tang Yuan wasn't just extremely fat. His memory wasn't that good either. He had forgotten the instructions long back. As a result, he wasn't left with much to go on. This section of the speech was a pure improvisation based on whatever little he could remember. Surprisingly, he had still managed a presentable performance. He was surely a very talented individual. Fatty Tang was still speaking in an endless torrent. The young Master Jun was in no mood to listen to the speech again. He turned and smilingly looked at Yang Mo. "How's your mood, little Miss Yang?" Yang Mo's pretty little face drooped instantaneously. Usually, he would refrain from retaliating when Jun Moxie called him Little Miss Yang. This time, however, he snorted and turned his head to leave. The prince equivalent's son was a clever and mischievous little devil for his age. However, he was just a 10-year-old boy. He had already been embarrassed in the incident which had previously taken place. Therefore, it was only natural that he would find it hard to remain calm. Moreover, no one had consoled him after that. In fact, even an adult wouldn't have reacted calmly, and would have found it difficult to endure. "It's no use getting angry," Hitman Jun snorted as he made no effort to coax the boy. Instead, he crossed his legs. "You know that all you can do is get angry when you meet a bully, and nothing else. You might as well refrain from losing your temper since there is no gain in it." "What's the use of controlling my anger if there's no gain in it?" Yang Mo had been enduring that pain for a while. And the tears had finally started to fall. "Calling you a little girl wasn't wrong since you're crying over such a small matter. What are you crying for?" If a real man is frequently reduced to tears, he loses respect. Such a man will obviously get bullied. Jun Moxie spoke in disdain as he picked up a big apple from a table. He cut out a piece and took a bite of it. "Is crying useful? Will crying solve the problem? You will leave my sight right away if you cry again. Get lost and weep somewhere else. I will not follow to console you. Moreover, I won't try to help you vent your anger. I won't cry." Yang Mo quickly wiped his tear, but continued to sob for a little while. He was very attached to the Jun family's young master. "Dad tells me that elder brother Jun is very clever. Can you please tell me what I should do?" Those three have been bullying me since childhood. I get so scared that I can't even think of anything. And I just want to run away. Elder brother, can you please tell me? How can I make them stop? Or how I can get revenge? And vent my anger? Taking revenge to vent your anger? That's not a good way. Jun Moxie's eyelid remained motionless as he calmly said, "They are the Emperor's sons. Who is the biggest in this world? The Emperor is. If the Emperor's son wants to bully you, is there anything you can do? All you can do is endure since your family isn't as powerful as theirs. I do not want Barrett anymore. Elder brother Moxie. Dad said that you are the smartest. And that no matter can baffle you." Yang Mo caught Jun Moxie's right arm and started shaking it. "I request you, elder brother Moxie, please give me an idea." "Stop it. Stop it. Stop it right now." Jun Moxie hastily pushed his hand away. He then continued impatiently, "Their father is the emperor, while your father is not. This matter cannot be solved with intelligence. You want me to help you? There is no chance. We don't have the means." Yang Mo stared blankly for a moment. Then his eyes started getting watery again, and soon the tears gushed out. His tiny mouth had just let out a few sobs when, suddenly, there was a resonant flash in his eyes. His temperament immediately reverted back to the way it was before he had started crying. He became quite, while his eyes opened as round as the full moon. "Elder brother Moxie, you just said that their father is the emperor, while mine is not. Why isn't my dad the emperor? They are both the sons of my grandfather, the previous emperor. Why is my father merely a prince, while his elder brother is the emperor? I am also the blood of the old emperor. So why is it that they can bully me, and I cannot rebel?" Yang Mo opened his big round eyes as he looked at Jun Moxie inquiringly. "You just said that you also have the blood of the previous emperor. So this entire matter is clearly your family's internal issue. How would I know why?" Jun Moxie appeared somewhat impatient as he spoke. "Your father didn't have future prospects. Just like you. He was also bullied since childhood. He didn't dare to rebel or call on the nonsense that was perpetrated. Therefore, his habit became his nature. In fact, he may be willing to bear the bullying even now when he's a grown-up. It's obvious that he didn't become the emperor. And now, even his son has to deal with bullying. I mustn't be bullied again." Yang Mo suddenly clenched his tiny fists. "I won't be bullied after I grow up. And neither will my descendants. This is no good, the problem is difficult to solve." Jun Moxie sighed in a false show of affection. "Is the emperor the only person who doesn't have to stand bullying? Will my descendants also be spared if I don't face it?" little Yang Mo asked. Jun Moxie sighed. "I don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to become the emperor just like you told me. Okay?" Yang Mo opened his eyes wide. There was a sincere look in them. You are the previous emperor's grandson. So, you are naturally entitled." Jun Moxie tilted his head as he focused his eyes on the boy. "Yes. You have the basic qualifications, but you fall too short of the other required traits. Hence, you are not qualified enough." "Then please tell me, elder brother Moxie, how do I change that? I must not be bullied again." Yang Mo asked. Jun Moxie was just about to reply when Jun Wuyi, who was sitting behind him, coughed loudly. His thundering cough had sounded very similar to that of someone suffering from tuberculosis. It was evident that Jun Wuyi was worried that other people might overhear that conversation. Hence, he tried to muffle this conversation. This deafening cough was indeed worthy of a Sky Xian expert's name, even though it had been limited to just this room. Jun Xie had been listening to this conversation and felt that it had started to sound a bit wrong. Though the conversation had started out as an effort to console the child, it had soon taken a completely different direction. Moreover, it had started to tread on a forbidden road and could possibly bear a very poisonous fruit. It was possible that the method Jun Moxie had adopted to coax this boy might end up being etched in his young mind. Hence, the young Master Jun's advisor tried to indicate that they only needed to keep up with this act until they gathered the financial resources they needed. This process would only take a month or two. However, in case they ended up instigating the equal prince's son against the throne, then they might end up regretting it later. What is this kid thinking? I am unable to answer this question of yours. Ask your dad when you go back home. I'm sure of what he's going to say. Good that they bully. Good that someone else is also taking up my role. What about it, huh? People bully the true and honest. Jun Moxie imitated the prince equivalent. How do you know that? My father speaks exactly like that every time I get bullied. He tells me that I should be bullied. And he even says that I should be bullied more severely. Yang Mo blinked as he looked at Jun Moxie with an expression of reverence. This older brother really is very smart. In fact, even my grandfather used to talk like this. Jun Moxie snorted and spoke the words of his heart. I obviously know. I am also aware that you are a little traitor. You will go back and inform your dad about whatever people will tell you. Isn't it so? I will not betray my friend. My dad told me that people who betray their friends are bad. But I am a good person. I won't betray my friend. Yang Mo's tender face became very red. Why are you worried? Jun Moxie glanced at him plainly as he said, You shouldn't be. How about I tell you a story first? Yang Mo hung his head and dejectedly agreed. Fine. Jun Xie had practically been sitting on the edge of his seat. He finally loosened up and secretly wiped away his cold sweat. These lunatics have finally stopped their discussion on that sensitive topic. Good thing that they've started with a story. I was really worried about the result of that. This story is called the Xian Wu Gate Coup. Jun Moxie was all smiles. Li Shimin was the son of a prince of the Tang Empire. He had two elder cousins, Li Jiancheng, the heir apparent, and Li Yuan. They used to bully their younger cousin a lot. At first, Li Shimin endured their bullying. However, when it became too much, he murdered them at the Xian Wu Gate. Then, he sat on the throne and became the emperor. He never got bullied by anyone ever again. Jun Xie also listened to Jun Moxie's story. Not only did he regularly listen to Jun Moxie's short stories, he was also very fond of them. Especially the story called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, whose contents had left Jun Xie stupefied. Since Jun Moxie was telling a story he hadn't heard before, he naturally listened with rapt attention. However, as Jun Moxie calmly continued telling his story, Jun Xie, whose nerves had just started to relax, suddenly became very taut again. In fact, cold sweat had drenched his clothes down to his undergarments. The fact that a mere story by the Jun family's young master would actually scare a Sky Xian expert to such a degree was definitely an unprecedented feat, if not an accomplishment. My God! I am an experienced general. Jun Xie was extremely infuriated by the Jun Moxie's actions. Are you trying to scare me to death? What utter nonsense are you narrating, kid? Heavens me! You have just incited a revolt. Yang Mo will listen and remember your words. Even if he is a child, he may still hold a grudge. hasn't your story just poured a barrel of oil over the fire? Good. Kill them. Kill them at once. Show them no mercy. Little Yang Mo waved his arms as he exclaimed in excitement. There was a strange flash in his eyes. Perhaps a desire, maybe it was a thirst, or some other fanatical idea. Jun Moxie's eyes were almost the same. I've said too much again. How many words can a small child remember? This is a seed, and must be irrigated with a little water to make it a tree. However, it will drown if I throw it directly into the ocean. A sudden burst of an exotic smell flowed out from below. In fact, the scent was so powerful that everyone exclaimed in wonder, even the people who had been repressing their emotions. Even the people seated upstairs focused their attention on it. After much promotion, the auction of the heavenly wine had finally begun. On the stage was an old man of 50. His posture was upright, and he was dressed entirely in black. He seemed full of excitement and energy, while his concentrated eyebrows were arched like two cold swords. Even Jun Moxie was surprised at seeing this person. Isn't this the sloppy and negligent old song? He had adorned his fresh attire in the same manner as a soldier would. He wasn't slouching anymore, and was standing straight from his waist up. All in all, he looked like a military general right now. Send a glass of wine before the kill. Song Shang. Some people in the audience immediately recognized Old Song the moment he appeared on the stage. There are rumors that Song Shang is a Sky Xian expert. And now he is an auctioneer for the Aristocratic Hall. Indeed, this is very aristocratic. The strong smell of the wine was floating in the air, and everyone was ferociously inhaling that scent. This wine is worthy of the title of heavenly grade wine, just on the basis of its wonderful smell alone. Suddenly, everyone became somewhat impatient. The eyes of that black-clothed man sitting behind Princess Ling Meng flashed a bizarre light after he breathed in that fragrance. He was the emperor of a country. Yet he had never come across such a high-quality wine. This was an obvious indication of the rarity of this wine's quality. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 248. The Gong to start the show. It was no wonder that the Aristocratic Hall was selling such a high-quality product. After all, this generation's wine god, Song Shang, had carefully fermented this heavenly wine. Even though Song Shang himself hadn't said anything, or admitted to fermenting the wine himself, everyone present couldn't help but think that he had. Song Shang was considered a formidable Sky Xian hitman, and was famous for his prowess as a warrior. However, Song Shang's identity as the wine god was how people had truly etched his character in their hearts. Several maids started to move about. Each of them was pushing a huge trolley. And each of these trolleys each had 12 small wine glasses. These wine glasses were nearly one of the smallest wine glasses available. However, it was still extremely exquisite since it was made of silver. Moreover, they looked extremely delicate like a cicada's wings since its whole body seemed to sparkle. Besides looking pleasant, these cups made of pure silver also assured people that the wine wouldn't be poisonous since poison would change color on coming in contact with silver. People could drink good wine without a worry on their minds since it would be completely safe. 3 wine glasses were placed on each table. Then, several maids arrived with wine bottles, and started pouring some wine very carefully so as to not spill even half a drop. The cold and extraordinary wine gurgled like a river as it was poured out of the bot's snout and filled the wine glasses. The hall was covered with an even stronger fragrance as the wine flowed into the glasses. Everyone looked at the glasses in front of them. Many of them, regardless of their status or wealth, could not stop their mouth from watering. The main item for this auction is a wine which has never been seen in the mainland, the heavenly class wine. We request everyone to first try the wine. That way, you will all be aware of what is at stake during the bidding. Song Shang's raised voice shook the audience in the hall. Naturally, he was very different from Tang Yuan. It seemed as if a deep and still lake was standing on the stage as the prominence of a sky Xian's demeanor exuded from his body language. After trying this wine, I am convinced that everyone will realize that it is a spiritual commodity and a priceless treasure. No expenses incurred and no price paid will be too much for this wine. It will all be worth it as long as one gets possession of this marvel. Song Shang waved his hand. Please. Everyone had already started coveting this never-before-seen, glorious wine. They impatiently lifted their wine glass as they inwardly cursed the stingy aristocratic hall for the small finger-sized cups provided for tasting. Everyone must be thinking that these glasses are too small, that they are not big enough to drink properly. Song Shang spoke in an unhurried manner. I would like to solemnly admit that in this regard, this hall is guilty. However, I beseech everyone to think if everyone drank this wine as much as they could, would they be able to truly cherish this heavenly wine? Moreover, would you all pay a high price for such wine then? This selfishness is necessary to curtail the greed which would violate this spiritual commodity. The guests were all fairly experienced in the ways of life. However, they didn't understand the importance of that line, and therefore, dismissed it with a laugh. All of them toasted, and then drained their glasses as they laughed. Princess Ling Meng didn't drink her cup. She didn't like drinking in general. Anyway, she wouldn't dare to drink without getting prior permission. The two black-clothed men sitting behind her were quite intimidating. So much so that mere thought of overstepping her boundaries in front of them was enough to terrify her. If it weren't for their orders, she would have already left. Therefore, she had no choice but to pass the wine glass behind to the two men while giving them a disdainful look. Now these two men had 3 glasses in between themselves. The two black-clothed men behind her were getting somewhat impatient, so much so that they practically on the verge of snatching the glasses. They drained their glasses in one gulp as soon as they received it. The wine left these two men somewhat emotional after entering their bellies. These men had drunk wine from all over the land, but they never had the good fortune to appraise such a high-quality commodity. The desire to continue drinking was strong in both of them. They both looked at the remaining glass simultaneously, and then looked at each other. Neither was willing to yield. Young Master Jun figured that the two men in black clothes who had accompanied Princess Ling Meng weren't ordinary. One of those two people was that man. However, if that were true, who in all of Tianxiang could be considered his equal? Who wouldn't yield in front of him? Who was that other man? Unexpectedly, the crowd fell silent after taking the first gulp. Then there was a sudden sound a while later. In the midst of this silence, a robust barrel-shaped man shouted as he stood up. His voice was full of emotion as he groaned joyously. There was a hint of a queer smell about him. Everyone turned to the source of the sound, and noticed a man of barely 40 years with a bewitched color spread across his face. He had put his hand on his cup, and had suddenly jumped to stand up. There was a foolish gaze on his face as he raised his head and said, "You truly deserve to be called the wine god, after fermenting this mysterious wine. Many of us have toppled after having just one cup. Tell me, when will the auction begin? What is the base price? It does not matter how much money is required, for this head of the family will take back at least 10 jars of this wine." The big man who had just stood up was actually Tianxiang City's foremost salt merchant. He was also the head of Tianxiang City's Chamber of Commerce, Zhao Menglong. Though this man's words seemed very vulgar, but everyone refused to reprimand him since they felt like doing the same. Hence, they all nodded in agreement. If it weren't for them being dukes, chancellors, and members of great families, none of them would have constrained themselves from saying what they really wanted to. Only Dugawudi, who was sitting on the second row, shouted with a string of dark expression across his face, "Sit down. Speak in accordance to your surroundings. Making a big fuss like that. What's next? Don't you see the people around you? Do you think this is an aristocrat mannerism?" Dugu Wudi was very anxious and depressed. The great General Dugu had come here for several reasons. One of his intentions was to show his support to Jun Wuyi. However, his real intention had been to witness Jun Moxie getting humiliated. He wanted to beat him and settle the bet that very same day. One bottle for over 10,000 taels. What a joke. He really is very crafty if he can sell it at such a price. I will win this bet anyhow, that's for sure. Who knew that at this point 10,000 silver taels for a bottle of wine wasn't going to be considered expensive? Not only would the wine be sold for that much, but the price will far exceed the original amount. Also, because of the successful sale, he would end up with a debt of 25 million silver taels. Life was indeed very unpredictable. How could General Dugu not be depressed? Even if he decided to erase his conscience for this once, it still wouldn't get him out of his problem. Moreover, he had disturbed the meeting of so many people at present. He inclined his head and narrowed his eyes as he angrily looked towards the room where the uncle-nephew duo of Jun Moxie and Jun Wuyi were sitting. Wouldn't those two be laughing uncontrollably at me right now? Zhao Menglong hiccuped as he sat down cutting a sorry figure. Although he was very powerful merchant in Tianxiang City, he wouldn't dare to argue with the head of the well-known, rude and unreasonable family. He kept the already empty cup down as he sat. Then, he drained the other 2 cups on his table and gave a profound and satisfied sigh. His face was full of happiness. Dugu Wudi turned his head and saw his treasured daughter smiling. Her face was adorned in a happy and satisfied expression as she looked at her own father's expression. It was almost as if she was taking delight in his misfortune. He couldn't help but snort and threaten, "If you smile like that again, I will start arranging marriage interviews for you from tomorrow." Dugu Xiaoyi's laughter suddenly ceased. Her big shining eyes filled with anger, and her pretty face became dark. She turned her head as she panted in rage. She then looked back at him as she spoke with an angry frown on her face. Look at yourself. Are you scared that you are going to lose? Such a huge debt. I would like to see how you pay it back. You won't be able to pay back 25 million silver taels even if you sell everything we have. Dugu Wudi was extremely infuriated by this, and rambled, "What payback? Your father has plenty of means. You say that even if your father sells everything, he won't be able to pay the debt off. Is it really that huge a sum? If I truly don't have the money, then I will use my daughter to make that boy my son-in-law. That ought to make up for the debt, and make you happy, right?" Dugu Xiaoyi's pretty face became red as she got up to leave in defiance. With a look of utmost disdain, she shouted, "I do not want that. Who would cherish that?" She was both angry and anxious. Although she liked Jun Moxie, she didn't want to be given to him as a stake in a bet. In that sort of condition, how would her beloved give her any respect? She suddenly started tearing up. Her eyes started glistening with tears as she stamped her foot. She then turned her tiny waist away without paying attention to her father, and tears continued to fall. Wudi was at a loss because he had forgotten to mind himself and had disrupted things. He hurried to console her. All of the 7 heroes and legends bravely rushing forward could not attend due to the limited seating. Therefore, only Duguing had been brought along. He was initially laughing at the joke, but was soon found himself kicked on his buttocks. "Won't you go down?" Jun Moxie asked his nephew. "I feel that something isn't right." Jun Moxie frowned and pointed his finger. "That man has arrived. Moreover, he has also brought someone along with him. It's better if I don't invite unnecessary trouble. Therefore, I plan to act cautiously." "Oh." Jun Wuyi's body shook. "I think everything will be all right." Jun Moxie laughed mischievously. "I am convinced that Tang Yuan and Yang Imo can handle this matter. I will only make an appearance at a critical point." Jun Wuyi smiled knowingly, but puckered his brows. "I fear that the knowledge of your strength will spread sooner or later. They will all eventually come to know of it." Jun Moxie agreed and shook his head. "Therefore, we should rush to develop our family's strength in such a way that no one would dare provoke us. This way, no one will be able to do anything even when they find out. After all, only the strength which does not diminish is the most powerful of all money." Meanwhile, Song Shang had praised the many interesting qualities of this wine, and had now withdrawn to the side. Song Shang, the wine god, had spoken well since he clearly understood the flavor of the wine. And though his explanation fell short of Jun Moxie's, everyone who heard it was now reluctant to leave. In fact, they all wanted to dabble with that good wine. Their hearts had started beating much faster, while the atmosphere had reached a new height of excitement. Now, as his role as the auctioneer, it was Tang Yuan's time to take to the stage. The auction of the heavenly wine formally begins. The base price of each bottle is 10,000 silver taels. The price can increase consistently since there will be no upper limit. And because of the limited quantity of this excellent wine, each table can take back 50 bottles at most. Yet, there may be many who won't get this wine. Tang Yuan energetically made the announcement. "May I venture to ask what this auctioneer Tang meant when he said that many will not receive this wine?" Many people asked impatiently as Tang Yuan's voice faded. "It has no special meaning. Only that Mr. Song has spent his entire lifetime traveling all over the mainland to collect the best quality materials. He has used all of it to brew this wine. Nothing more. There isn't any more of this high-quality wine left. Therefore, this is the first and the last auction of this heavenly wine." Tang Yuan sighed. "Only this one time," everyone cried in alarm. They all looked at each other in dismay. "This excellent wine will go permanently out of stock today." Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 249. Who is worse than whom? Everyone thought that this was reasonable. It must have been difficult to find the raw materials to ferment such a high-quality wine, right? Yes. It's fair that there's only this one batch. Since it will only be this one batch, how many bottles are there in total? This question was asked by a person who wasn't necessarily an authority on wines. In fact, she hadn't even tasted the wine, for it was Princess Ling Meng. Fatty Tang answered her question despite being astonished by it. The total number of wine bottles on auction is 3,000. And no matter the price, wine such as this heavenly wine appears only briefly. Therefore, just drink it. Even if it means that this wine will get finished. 3,000 bottles. People who were very fond of the wine exclaimed. 3,000 bottles was a lot. It would be considered a massive number. However, One had to remember that many people were invited for the auction, and at least 100 people were participating in it. Therefore, each would be able to obtain only 30 bottles on an average. However, the upper limit of purchase for each person was 50 bottles. Moreover, in the first row was the royal family, and behind them were all the great houses of the kingdom. These people would certainly take initiative and spend money so as to not return empty-handed. It was likely that they would take turns in procuring for their needs. On top of that, representatives from over a dozen such great families were present here. Their consumption would reach around 800 bottles of wine, at the very least. Hence, the remaining 80 or so families would have to compete for 2,200 bottles. This made it clear that there would be many who wouldn't be getting any of this heavenly wine. If one was unable to bid successfully, it was possible that they would forever lose the opportunity to taste wine of such an extraordinary quality. The competition between the merchants would invariably be unprecedented and bitter. Many people secretly clenched their fists. They were ready to shout out the price once when the time came. Now we formally begin the auction. The first batch consists of 50 bottles. Only one person can win all of this. Tang Yuan's fat stomach shook as he smugly announced. He felt that the most important moment of his entire life was upon holding the hammer and making the final decision. I bid 1 million taels for these 50 bottles. A man shouted. Surprisingly, the first person to bid had actually doubled the price. Some people inwardly cursed the man after hearing this. Arrogant. Sir, this is just the first bid, don't treat it so much like game. Won't the prices become sky high when our turn comes because you shouted out like this? The person who had just called out slowly stood up from his seat in the third row. He was wearing a blue gown. It looked as if the ocean was rippling undulated inside its in endless folds. In fact, it seemed to everyone that a thin layer of blue ocean had suddenly appeared in front of them. The man leisurely smiled and said, I am Hai Chenfeng, the leader of Tianxiang City's Jinyang Gang. I have always loved wine. Therefore, I wish to covet the heavenly wine. In fact, I don't think that 1 million silver taels is too large an amount for this wine. I ask anyone who I might have offended to forgive me. Hai Chenfeng had naturally been brought in by Jun Moxie as a precaution against many eventualities. He needed someone he could trust. True to the task, Hai Chenfeng had stood up to receive the first shelling of criticisms. Naturally, there was another reason behind this action of Hai Chenfeng's. He had done this to announce that Tianxiang City's #1 underworld faction, the Jinyang Gang, had undergone a change of leadership. Moreover, he had also demonstrated that gang leader Hai was taking the Jinyang Gang to the upper echelons of the Tianxiang City. Hai Chenfeng's sudden appearance caused everyone's gaze to be immediately drawn to him, like pieces of metal being attracted to a magnet. Hai Chenfeng stood there motionless, but he looked a bit under the weather, for his complexion had turned somewhat pale. In fact, Jun Moxie, who was watching all this from upstairs, was left puzzled. Don't tell me that he has sustained serious injuries in these 2 days? This is becoming too frequent, right? It seems that I will have to train him and increase his strength at least once or twice. Otherwise, things might get risky. Only the young Master Jun could dare to think this, increasing a Sky Xian expert's strength by 2 levels on a whim. Who would believe that? The 3 princes and the members of all the great families paid very careful attention to him. They all knew that Jinyang Gang had undergone a change of leadership. However, they hadn't expected that the mysterious new leader would turn out to be a Sky Xian expert. It was important to know that Spirit Xian experts considered themselves above everyone else and rarely interfered in worldly quarrels. Just below the spirit Xian experts were the sky Xian experts. They formed the backbone of the world's powerhouses. Taking the Tang family as an example, it was one of the most powerful families in Tianxiang City. However, even its most powerful member was a mere Earth Xian expert. And now, there was a strong Sky Xian expert who had unexpectedly become the head of a gang. Even if the Jin Yang gang was supposedly the city's #1 gang, it still wasn't powerful enough to compete with the latter. Hence, everyone found this to be a bit too outrageous. However, bearing this Sky Xian expert to obtain these 50 bottles of extraordinary wine was acceptable. Hence, no one else participated in this bid for a while. As the dust settled, everyone saw a black-clothed youngster leisurely standing up in the second row. Although his face was covered with a veil, his bearing was extremely graceful. Each and every movement of his seemed to be comfortably executed. So much so that it seemed as if he was a reservoir of all the elegance under the sun. Moreover, his conduct was a textbook example of paragon. This black-clothed youngster was the Li family's Li Yuan. Li Yuan was attending a public event after many years. I bid 1,500,000 silver taels. It seemed from Li Yuan's voice that he was smiling. His voice sounded like a cool breeze passing through a forest on an autumn day. It was clear, and there was no hint of anger in it. This is the first round of auction for this heavenly wine. This is of great importance. This young master is also fascinated with this wine. Therefore, I must ask gang leader Hai to forgive me. Li Yuan smiled as he looked at Hai Chenfeng. It seemed that his look was one of admiration. However, he did not reveal his truest and innermost feelings. It was just the evening of the day before yesterday when 2 of his seniors had been dispatched. But they were forced to return after sustaining serious injuries. And their culprit was the man in front of his eyes, the new leader of the Jin Yang gang. Although he had come to know that both sides had suffered injuries, how could he allow this auction to go as per Hai Chenfeng's wishes? Especially when his eldest brother apprentice was sitting right behind him. Li Yuan's main aim was simply to disrupt Hai Chenfeng's impetus and test the financial capabilities of the Jin Yang gang. After all, the commodity on sale would cost millions of silver taels. Hai Chenfeng would be a very brave man if he were to blindly increase the price. In that case, Li Yuan would back down at an opportune moment, and Hai Chenfeng and the Jin Yang gang would suffer a crippling financial blow. This would also serve as revenge for his 2 injured senior brother disciples. So the Li family's young master is also very fond of wines. Ha! Hai Chenfeng chuckled gently. This, however, is not a problem. It is only natural that the price will go high. And since that is the case, I bid 3 million silver taels. Hai Chenfeng had never cared for money. Especially now when the Jin Yang gang's purpose was to help Jun Moxie earn profit. Therefore, no matter what price Li Yuan would bid, Hai Chenfeng could surmount it. However, this price wasn't enough for Li Yuan to consider withdrawing. Moreover, he was also worried that no one else would now dare to compete against Hai Chenfeng. Anyhow, such an opportunity didn't come to him very often. Therefore, he naturally wanted to add a little bit more. What he would add would keep the price almost the same. 3 million. Everyone present on the scene was a powerful personality in their own merit. And although 3 million was not a small amount, it wasn't very high either. However, spending so much to buy 50 bottles of wine, 60,000 per bottle, was still quite extravagant. These gangs will never change, money is dirt to them. Gang leader Hai is very rich. As expected. Li Yuan laughed calmly as his glance turned as intoxicating as a joyful river. This young master bids 3 million silver taels, and 1 copper. 3 million silver taels, and 1 copper? Such a bid was clearly meant as a blatant insult. Hai Chen Feng was infuriated, and a wave of outrage rose within him. He started breathing violently as he looked at Li Yuan in a cold manner. He said, "Young Master Li's family is truly great, adding just 1 copper to the 3 million. He he. However, my heart is untroubled in this regard, and I will not hesitate to spend 10,000 gold taels. Therefore, I bid 5 million. Hai Chen Feng was really mad at Li Yuan. This boy is extremely annoying. You increase the price, but add only a single copper. This is too strange. Damn it. He decided to end it with Li Yuan at that moment. This matter had just become a question of dignity. Gang leader Hai, didn't you yourself say that it is only natural that the price will go high? Then why are you getting so mad about this? Such behavior isn't good. He he. Li Yuan said lightly. Every family here is a noble, and everyone's demeanor is in accordance to that status. This young master has merely added to the price without violating any rules. There aren't any stipulations regarding how much we can add. Also, my Li family is a very small family. Therefore, we cannot afford to add a lot of money. Kindly forgive me. However, since gang leader Hai feels this way, I will admit that I have sinned since I wish to avoid annoying him. Hai Chen Feng's face was pale, but he was happy inside. You try to add more to the price, and I will immediately stop. I will make you bear the burden of this black pot with your own pocket. Li Yuan paused for a moment, and then finally said with elegance, I will bid 5 million silver taels, and 2 coppers. Hai Chen Feng flew into a rage. He jumped on top of his table, and let out a huge roar. You! Boy! You've gone too far, you! Just then, he heard young Master Jun's faint voice, right in his ear. It was similar to that of a housefly. Let him have it. Hai Chen Feng was stumped. He started looking around. In the Xian continent, there was no technique known to send one's voice to others in such a manner. Hai Chen Feng had no idea how that voice entered his ear. Why does it seem that no one else heard that? This is too weird, right? I am telling you to let him have it. Do not bid again. That's an order. Jun Moxie's voice sounded inside Hai Chen Feng's ear once again. The voice was very strict and commanding, even if it was faint. Hence, he could not disobey that command. Yes. I will obey your orders. Jun Moxie had taken note of Li Yuan the moment he had arrived. He had then searched through the previous Jun Moxie's memories, and had come to realize that this was the first time that he was seeing Li Yuan in person. Jun Moxie had a sense of uneasiness the first time he laid eyes on this man. Li Yuan's bearing, whatever he said, or the movements he made were too perfect. He was just perfect, regardless of what was at hand. However, does such a perfect personality truly exist in this world? Jun Moxie would never be convinced of that. The heaven and the earth aren't perfect. Nothing is perfect in this entire world. Such a perfect person does not exist anywhere in the world. Even if Li Yuan demonstrated a perfect behavior, Jun Moxie knew at a glance that he was actually a fake. Fake to the core. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 250. Locked onto their respective targets. Li Yuan was entrenching his position step by step whenever he spoke. and was drawing Hai Chen-feng into an ambush. Hai Chen-feng was a seasoned Sky Xian expert and was usually calm. However, he had suddenly gotten angry and had started behaving violently because of a few spoken words. This scheme of Li Yuan was as profound as the ocean. He was indeed a formidable enemy. Jun Moxie was certain that Li Yuan would eventually stop bidding if Hai Chen-feng would continue to blindly increase the price. He felt so because if it were him, he would have compelled the price to rise high, and then retreat at the opportune moment. Your plan was really good, Li Yuan. It's a pity that you met Hai Chen-feng, and behind him me. And you were doomed in that. This plan would have swindled any other person to fail. You are indeed worthy of applause. Therefore, Jun Moxie had decided to act decisively and put a stop to Hai Chen-feng's impulsive actions. Ha ha ha. Hai Chen-feng was very experienced in worldly matters. And although Li Yuan had riled him up for a while, he had instantly gotten back his bearings with just a small warning from young Master Jun. It was extremely embarrassing for Hai Chen-feng to imagine himself standing atop the table. This was a disgrace to his identity as a Sky Xian expert. Nevertheless, the lofty and towering Hai Chen-feng suddenly burst into laughter. The Li family is worthy of being called one of the greatest families of Tianxiang City. It is indeed incomparably rich. He. I am a mere gang leader. Who am I to provoke the imperial preceptor's family? He. These 50 bottles aren't the only ones with this wine. Keeping in mind young Master Li's reputation, I will withdraw from this bid since he is so determined to get this batch. He calmly stepped down after saying this. Then, in the middle of this gathering, he cupped his palm towards Li Yuan as the corners of his mouth rose in a faint smile. Young Master Li is really fond of this wine. Therefore, I congratulate you for your successful bid in the first round of this auction. A few words had completely turned an awkward situation around. And those words were truly incisive. Li Yuan was astonished for a moment. Though no one could make that out since his expression was hidden by the veil he was wearing, not a single ripple of the storm broke past the veil. Li Yuan was completely puzzled. Hai Chen-feng was falling into his trap. In fact, it had seemed that he preparing to shout 10 million judging by the degree of his emotional upheaval. However, Li Yuan had never expected that the leader of Jin Yang Gang would stand down and beat the drums of retreat at such a crucial time. How is this possible? Do I want the wine? This is a joke. Of course the wine is important to me, but I know that the first 2 rows are bound to get their fill. In fact, they won't even have to spend a very high price. They may even get it at the base price. How many bottles have I obtained after spending these precious 5 million silver taels? Li Yuan felt that a matter had not gone according to his calculations for the first time in his life. But Hai Chen-feng's anger didn't seem false. So what's going on? Could one really control themselves in the nick of time? Not only did he withdraw from this meaningless struggle, but he also prevented hurting himself from hurting his reputation. He was almost about to prove that he uses force to bully people. Hai Chen-feng surely doesn't have such insight, right? Is there a skillful person behind him who might be providing instructions? If there is someone who stopped him when they saw the matter getting out of hand, what method were they using to transmit their instructions? He was completely puzzled. This troublesome train of thoughts ran in his mind for a period of time. Li Yuan was staring blankly at first, but he was then obliged to smile and act cordially the next moment. He got up and cupped his hands calmly. He then said, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to gang leader Hai for allowing me to win this bid. He laughed gently in self-ridicule before continuing, I figure that this young master has fallen into his own trap. Gang leader Hai understood the dirty game I was playing. I admire gang leader Hai's wisdom. I hope to seek the brilliant gang leader Hai's wisdom whenever I get the opportunity. Upstairs, Jun Moxie could not help but sigh. Li Yuan handles matters in a watertight manner. He is extraordinary. A person discerning this matter would see that Li Yuan had deliberately tried to disrupt the bidding. Moreover, it was clearly visible that he had raised the price in a way which would certainly embarrass Hai Chenfeng. Everyone jeered at him when his plan unexpectedly failed, and he had to spend a monumental 5 million silver taels to obtain those 50 bottles. However, Li Yuan's manner of speech suddenly became very frank. He had then taken responsibility for his actions and admitted defeat with a smile. This act demanded a lot of courage and strength of character. The two black-clothed men behind Princess Ling Meng looked at each other. Their eyes were full of admiration. He adapted to the situations as they arose. This Li Yuan is some guy. He is a rare individual in this generation. Mr. Wen smiled as he said this in a low voice. Could it be that you don't think him to be clever? The other black-robed man was the current emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. His vision was sharp and profound. He answered in an equally low voice. Indeed. I think he is quite worthy. However, the man behind Hai Chenfeng is even more commendable. He gave his instructions without leaving a trace. No trace will be found even if you look for it. Moreover, I believe that person's wisdom is in no way inferior to Li Yuan's. In fact, it's possible that this man may even be better than Li Yuan. Another man behind Hai Chenfeng? Mr. Wen did not understand. Mr. Wen, think. Li Yuan's words had pushed Hai Chenfeng into a very perilous trap. He knew that Hai Chenfeng would compete when he raised the price by 500,000. However, he had left Hai Chenfeng with no choice but to get angry when he added just a single copper. Moreover, Hai Chenfeng was in a completely confused state of mind. And then Li Yuan added only 2 coppers in his third bid. Hai Chenfeng was already unable to restrain his anger by then. It was improbable that he would think clearly from there on. He was likely to become a mad bull blinded by anger, and would have resolutely charged forward. In fact, he would charge stubbornly even if he up against a thick wall which was had to break through. Mr. Wen closed his eyes and looked back at everything that had happened. He realized that it was true. Hai Chenfeng had forgotten the manners of a Sky Xian expert, and had gone into a fit of rage. Shockingly, he had jumped on top of his table in extreme anger, completely disregarding his image. It had seemed as if he was about to explode. He then jumped onto the table and said this. You, boy, you go too far. After that, he suddenly stopped. This is the point when one usually doesn't stop. It was as if a massive river had been suddenly halted in the middle by something. Then he calmly stepped down from the table and cupped his hands to admit defeat. This was an exceptional counterattack. In fact, it can even be said that this was a very dangerous counterattack. Just figure this. Li Yuan isn't looking around the hall. I reckon that he and I have the same suspicion. Therefore, nobody can understand what sort of an enlightened person that man is, or what kind of method he is using to instruct Hai Chenfeng. This is why I said that the man behind Hai Chenfeng is truly difficult to deal with. Whether it is his wisdom, or his extraordinary methods. His Majesty the Emperor smiled. Mr. Wen evaluated at the situation accordingly. Li Yuan was deliberately not looking all over the place. However, he was still spying around secretly. He naturally couldn't keep this hidden from Mr. Wen's eyes. His Majesty's eyes were sparkling with the splendor of his wisdom and foresight. 1. If you or I were in Hai Chenfeng's place, and were receiving such insults, we also would not have been able to control ourselves. Wouldn't you agree? That is why I believe that Hai Chen Feng was stopped by someone else. And that person chose a very suitable moment to act. He caused that Li Yuan to suffer by making him incur a huge loss. This person may be the main reason behind Hai Chen Feng suddenly taking control of the Jin Yang gang. He. The original leader of this gang was called Jin Feng Lai, right? Paying attention to a great many events, the country's emperor had surprisingly remembered the name of the head of an underworld faction. One could say that the emperor was truly prodigious. I also suspect that this person may be the true organizer of this auction. The emperor's expression was a bit cold. We might be able to glean some information about this person if we observe Hai Chen Feng. Mr. Wen looked at Hai Chen Feng. His eyes were shining as he said, "If that doesn't work, this old man will seize Hai Chen Feng and interrogate him slowly. This old man can extract information from him even if he is strong and hard-headed." Mr. Wen's tone was simply too much. Hai Chen Feng was a Sky Xian expert. Only a few people were stronger than him. And now this person was talking about capturing and interrogating him. Hai Chen Feng is the Blue Master's apprentice. His Majesty smiled. We cannot provoke the Blue Master. In fact, we must not provoke him. The gains we will achieve will not make up for our losses. Then he leisurely looked at Tang Yuan. There are many methods which can be used to gather information. Li Yuan indifferently deposited the money he was required to pay. And he did it under the public eye. A man from the aristocratic hall followed him and made preparations for handing over the wine. Li Yuan, however, took a seat and rested in peace. This Li Yuan is a formidable character. Young Master Jun concentrated as he looked at the man downstairs. To him, that man was a definition of a threat. And according to his accurate intuition, the threat from Li Yuan was actually quite huge. Jun Moxie couldn't allow any threat to exist owing to his instinct as the #1 assassin in his previous life. Especially something that could threaten his life. Usually, his first thought in such situations was to destroy the threat. Jun Moxie smiled as he intentionally or otherwise looked in the same direction. Li Yuan is the eldest grandson of the Imperial Grand Preceptor. He is also the leading figure amongst the Li family. The Meng family and many other smaller families' younger generation. He has never attended this kind of an event before. Moxie. He is here in person to show face in Grand Preceptor Li's stead. I do not care about their face. Their face can be as big as an ass. It has no meaning as far as I am concerned. Jun Moxie smiled. What I genuinely care about is him spending that much money. A ray of light flashed in his eyes as he said this. I must keep Li Yuan in my line of sight. Hitman Jun had secretly decided. The first batch of the 50 bottles had been sold for an unexpectedly high price of 5 million silver taels and 2 coppers. Tang Yuan was very excited as he brought out the second batch of 50. This person bids 1 million silver taels for those 50 bottles. I don't know who else will increase the price. Hai Chen Feng stood up once again. He was more than qualified to make this bid. It was only natural that he would make this bid. Moreover, it would be considered very strange if he didn't make any more bids. I bid 1,500,000. A sharp and sweet sound resounded. It did not sound too urgent, nor did it sound too slow. Everyone turned to the source of the sound and were surprised to see that it was Princess Ling Meng. She had unexpectedly bid such a high price. This story will be continued to chapter 251. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.